Welcome to Layers of Communication with your host, Lydia Taggart. Life presents experiences that add layers to who we are and how we see the world, affecting how we communicate. Lydia is here to take apart the layers and create new ways to connect and build relationships. So now, please welcome the host of Layers of Communication, your core boss, Lydia Taggart.
Welcome to Layers of Communication on the iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and BBM Global Network. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. I'm so glad that you're here today. If you'd like to call in and join the conversation, that number is 1-866-451-1451. Now, today we're going to be talking about the power of healing touch. Now, touch is wrapped up all in emotions and feelings. And we know feelings are meant to be felt, right? And one of the layers of communication that we get stuck in sometimes is being afraid of touching people. There's so many, like you can get sued and have all sorts of problems with the law if you touch in an inappropriate way. And so generally, a lot of us have just decided, I'm not going to touch anybody because that's safe, right? But there are appropriate ways to include touch. And touch is one of our basic needs, actually. There's been studies done that show humans have this understanding to communicate through touch, no verbal or anything else. They did some studies, all sorts of studies that have up to 78% accuracy of what emotion were these people feeling when they touched me. And it's through, they defined 8 different emotions that could be identified just by a simple touch. And so there's this power of touch and feeling. Our feelings, I just got back from this great road trip. We went down to Sedona, Arizona, and it was definitely summer there. I wanted to wear shorts. We went out on this hike, and I could feel the sun, and it was just gorgeous and beautiful and warm. And we hiked up this little hill. It was kind of steep, and I didn't realize it was a lot steeper than I thought it was when you sit for 5 hours after you're doing kind of a little exercise workout. And when we got home, it was snowing, and went from this great summer experience to snow blizzard in just a matter of a few hours. And I felt the difference. My body could tell what was happening is that touch of the air and the environment on my body. Touch gives us so much information. And our feelings, I woke up this morning after that little hike, and I sat for those 5 hours more before I got home, and then I was ready to crash and go straight to bed. And this morning I went down the stairs and I was like, oh, I feel that in my legs. Wow, I have some legs there. And it's another feeling that it's an experience we have, right? So touch is really our primary first language that we experience as infants. They need to touch everything. They need to put everything in their mouths to feel what it's like. They need to reach out and touch stuff, and they carry that through to their toddler years. And we're always saying, don't touch that. Don't touch that. That's hot. Don't touch it. You're going to hurt yourself. Don't touch it. One of our family rules that we still have is if it's not yours, don't touch. Oh, but it's so shiny. Look how it sparkles when I hold it like this. Like, no, it's not yours. Don't touch. And we say, can I see that? And we reach out to touch it. We see with our eyes, not our hands, but we still need to touch it. Touch is just so at the core level of who we are. We need to touch things to interpret our world. Even as we've grown up and we're adults, we still need to touch to interpret things. I went to this really great boot camp. It was by Ulaf Creative down in Sedona. It was really fantastic. And one of the first things, my friend Sharon Ulaf, she's putting it on, and she comes up to me as she touches my hair. She just kind of runs her hands over my head. And she says, oh, I've been wanting to do that ever since I met you and I saw you across the room. back in November we met. And I was like, yeah, we need to interpret things through touch. And that was really, we're friends, so we can touch each other. And it wasn't scary or weird or anything. And I was visiting my new friend that I made there, Penny, and she got a little bit emotional. And we know feelings are meant to be felt, because the whole purpose of life is to feel things. And she was getting a little bit emotional. And this happens with me often. If I'm visiting with someone and the emotions come up, oh, can I just give you a hug? Oh, yes. And so as we're trying to hold back our tears or they're falling down our cheeks, we embrace and we hug. And it's like, oh, yes, it's an emotional bonding moment through touch. And I turned to meet my new friend, Ivan, and we had a great conversation. We didn't cry or anything, but he saw my interactions with Penny. And when we were done visiting and meeting each other, he says, so do you want to give me a hug? Yes, of course I want to give you a hug. Touching and hugging is a good thing. It creates such a strong bond. It's healing. It helps us to interpret our relationships. And it's a different kind of hug than if you're in a romantic relationship. There's different kinds. You can give people a hug and not be romantically involved. The layers of our life and our love languages are just in different orders. Everyone needs this touch. They've done so many studies about kids in particular and how they relate to being touched. If you have an encouraging pat on the back or a tap on the shoulder or, these different things. There's one fascinating study done where they were seeing how well students did if the teacher smiled at them or patted them on the back, and the differences in how much they could remember and understand and how much more involved they were in their class. And this one particular class, it was a statistics class. They were doing statistics, and the teacher just went around and touched them on their shoulder while they looked at their paper. And he walked around a little more, patted somebody else, and once in a while he would say, oh, yes, good job. And as he was touching them, kind of planted that on them. And statistics isn't really a class that gets a whole lot of participation, generally speaking. It's a numbers class. It's not really an involved participation kind of class, but they always ask, in every class that I've ever seen, they always ask if somebody will go up to the board and write down their answer or something like that. And they had a significant increase of willingness for those kids who were touched to participate. They were more willing and excited to go up and interact with the teacher and share. And touch is really, really a great thing. It's one of the things we teach in our frame training. If you layer your languages, you have that compliment and a slight touch. It doesn't have to be a big, heavy or long, or you don't have to slap them on the back. If you have any kind of touch, it solidifies and seals that compliment into who they are. And that's so magical. It's just, if you want a miracle to happen, try giving a compliment at the same time you touch. And hugging is the same kind of way. You solidify that you've created a relationship. So we're going to talk more about the power of hugs. And our guest is Celeste Allred. She's going to be joining us after the break and talk to us more about power of touch and hugs. This is Lydia Taggart on Layers of Communication. You're listening on TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and the BBM Global Network. We'd love to have you call in and join our conversation at 1-866-451-1451. Welcome back to Layers of Communication. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. You're listening on the BBM Global Network, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn Radio. Our call-in number is 1-866-451-1451. We're really excited to be visiting today with Celeste Allred. And we're talking today about the healing power of touch and hugs, how powerful they can be. Let me tell you a little bit about Celeste before she joins us. Celeste Allred has an alternative approach to her holistic life coaching, which her career in this began in 1998. She's been certified in a lot of different ways, including herbology, alternative health facilitating, and Reiki master before she started her family. And she's been married now for 17 years, and she and her husband have 8 children, with the oldest being 16 and the youngest is 5 months old. After losing one of her daughters at 11 weeks old from the doctor's mistakes, she realized how much we as mothers have been taught to doubt our intuition and how much we struggle with confidence in raising our families. And so she has now created some programs, one of which is the Hugs, You've Got This. Her purpose is to educate and empower women to be successful and intuitive mothers. And I know one of the ways that I feel more intuitive and in tune with my children's needs is through this power of touch. I've got some of my kids are very, very much a touch love language. And it's really helpful to understand where they're coming from if I can understand this power of touch and the intuitiveness with that. So Celeste, welcome to our show. I'm so excited that you're here, and you can tell us more about the Hugs, You've Got This program and how you feel about the touch and intuitiveness. How do you feel about that?
I have enjoyed touch, and it's kind of, touch is not my normal love language. It's actually fairly far down on my list. But I seem to have been blessed with a family whose primary love language is touch. So for me, it's one I've had to learn to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a very interesting journey for me to learn how to meet those needs and to learn how for myself to be comfortable with touching. And
so I think right here you can help our audience a lot with this, because so many people have that, like an aversion to touch almost, like you can't touch me unless I invite you to touch me. And how did you get to a point with being surrounded with people who love touch? How did you get to a point where you could accept it and appreciate it the way you do now?
Partly by just realizing that my job as their mother is to help them meet those love languages. Whether or not it's comfortable for me, that's what they need. And I have that job to help them feel loved and secure. And it's not even necessarily for me, but it's necessary for them. For instance, my husband's primary love language is touch.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a household where touch was not really healthily allowed. Being angry was a better description of the emotion state that was allowed. But just casually walking up to somebody and hugging them, not so much. And my mom says from the get-go, I was like her least snuggly baby from day one. So she goes, you ruined me for I thought I'd have all these snuggly kids and stuff, and you ruined me. So from day one, I've had to learn how to touch. And I figured out in the last few years for me that part of the reason I didn't like to be touched is because I'm so empathic that often touching people would physically hurt. And so it's really been a challenge for me to learn how to touch. I have this really good bubble, and even my children know when mom's been overtouched, just stay out of the bubble.
Yeah.
But
it's funny that you mentioned the snuggling with the kids. My son, Steven, we found out that he's my oldest, and we found out that he had Asperger's. Well, he still has it. But I was expecting a snuggly baby, and my mom would tell me, just hug him more. He'll stop crying if you hug him more. But it wasn't like that. It was like one day I just said, I can't handle your crying anymore. I need to put you in a safe place. You're in your crib, and I need to walk out of the room and just catch my breath for a minute. And I put him down and walked out of the room, and he stopped crying. And I said, what? All you needed was for me to leave you alone? And I went back in the room and I said, is that really all you need? And he looked at me and he started crying again. I said, fine, I'll give you some space. You're overdone. And when we were able to find that balance, like you're saying, that he needed to not be touched as much, oh, life was so much easier. And now he's 16 and he will still, he will lean in. He won't like give me a hug with both arms because it's not his thing, but he'll stand there expecting a hug anyway because everybody else is getting a hug and he likes hugs, but he's not really a hugger. He won't give you a hug. He'll stand there and lean in towards you and wait for you to hug him. It's really fun to see the differences, but even with his autism and his Asperger's, he still wants to be touched and hugged to his level.
Yeah, it does make a huge difference. And back to the touch, I had to learn a healthy compromise between me and my husband on this touch thing. And a lot of times when late in the evening or something, when it's just us together, I'll sit with my feet in his lap or something, or I'll have a toe touching, or I'll sit next to him or something. Not necessarily even like hugging or anything, but just to have that physical connection for him, not for me. It's for him. I'm good not being touched as much. But I have noticed personally that we went to marriage seminar. It was last year at this time. And one of the things they mentioned is to just slow dance. And so we've tried to slow dance at least once a day. It averages out to about every other day in reality. But just that few minutes for one song, just holding each other and slow dancing has made such a difference in our relationship for both of us. And there's nothing inappropriate or anything like that about it, but it just feels so relaxing to both of us just to spend those few minutes just touching and holding each other.
Yes.
And it's been so healing.
Great. I have some questions that I'm excited to ask you about after the break. I love how you say you know your healthy levels, and it can just be a toe touch, and it doesn't have to be a full embrace all the time to have that need satisfied. I love those points. So we're going to ask some more questions. We're with Celeste Allred today. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. This is Layers of Communication, and you're listening on TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and the BBM Global Network. If you'd like to join our conversation, that call-in number is 1-866-451-1451. Welcome back to iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and the BBM Global Network. If you'd like to call in and join our conversation on Layers of Communication today, the number is 1-866-451-1451. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. Today we're visiting with Celeste Allred about the power of touch. And before the break, we were just talking about how slow dancing and it's relaxing for the person who is a touch love language primary, and also for someone who is not a primary touch love language person. Is relaxing for both parties. So Celeste, I want to ask you about your ideas and your thoughts on bridging that gap. Is this touch an essential part of your life, even though it's not your primary love language? Do you still need it in your life the way, I mean, of course, it's not the same way as someone like your husband who is a primary touch love language, but do you still find you need touch?
I have come to find out that I need touch, and a lot more than I thought I did, especially when it hasn't been there for a while. You know, you and your partner have a fight, and you sleep on opposite sides of the bed, and you're not touching anymore, and you start to notice where you're not connected at. And my husband always goes, I can tell when you're mad at me because you're not touching me. And I'm going, no, actually, there is some truth to that, but it's also, I just got overtouched. I'm too stressed out to have that extra energy to give to them.
Mm-hmm.
But when I can reground and recenter and just take some of that time for me, step back, recharge me, and then I can go out and touch more. And I can be there better for my children because I have from teenagers to baby, and they always want mom. And they want to be on mom's lap and crawling all over mom and snuggling next to mom and back on mom's lap and back on mom's lap. And it's like, I just got my lap empty. I have things to do besides hold you all day. And
yes.
I have to go recharge at times. But you know what? I realize that. And I realize that for me to give what I need to give to my children, I have to charge. And that it's okay.
Yeah, and it is okay.
And they've learned at times that, you know what, mom is overtouched. And one of the biggest signals is I'll go get in the bathtub. Mom does not share her bath with anybody.
Nice. Yeah, and we can get overwhelmed so easily if there's someone who is just starving for touch. One of the things that I want to do when I become famous and a millionaire enough, billionaire probably, but I want to start an organization in one of those foreign countries they just don't get how important it is to touch and love each other. And they have volunteers go out there. And the difference in my foundation would be I would pay to send people out there. I would have employees that their job would be to go and hug these kids in the orphanages and stuff. Right now, there's people who will facilitate volunteers going and paying their own way and everything. I think they need it to be more consistent because consistency makes everything, right? And these volunteers, they go there and the kids in the orphanages just cling to them and they just want someone to love them and be able to touch and hold them so badly. And we don't see that here in the United States. We don't see that at all anywhere where people are just starving for this attention, unless you're a mother who's trying to go to the bathroom by herself or have a phone call alone or something. My mom would describe when our kids were little, she says she felt like a potato chip on an anthill because they need to be with you right then, right there. And some of my kids have kind of mellowed out a little bit, but I've still got one especially touchy kind of kid. And I found that since we have these love languages all within us, it's also dependent on the environment that we're in. My kids don't act like an anthill with a potato chip. They don't act that way if they're at school, but they will act that way a lot more at home. Sometimes I feel like touch is my primary love language, like if I'm with my husband. And other times I'm like, I have been so touched enough by this kid. Touch is not my primary love language anymore. It can be moved around, a little bit. And you said one thing that I really, really love, and I want to talk more about connected. How you said when we're touching, it's connecting. And we want to connect at the core and get to the deepest root of who we are in our most meaningful relationships. And touch, you can't get much closer physically if you're touching. But emotionally, it kind of, sometimes we think that there's a difference there, that the emotions and touch and feeling are different categories and they don't overlay. Especially if our primary love language is something more like words of affirmation, we get an emotional bond that's deeper than if we're being touched over our limit. What are your thoughts on that, the connected part of the power of touch?
One of the things that I do a lot of is energy work, okay? Mm-hmm. And when we have that touch, for many people, it's easier to have that energetic exchange, whether it's positive or negative. And we pick up so much when we're in that exchange place.
Oh, Celeste, I'm going to have to interrupt you for our commercial. I'm sorry. This energetic exchange, we're going to come back and talk more after the break. This is so fascinating, the energetic exchange. We'll talk more after the break, if you don't mind. This is Layers of Communication on iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and the BBM Global Network. We're visiting with Celeste Allred today. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. Welcome back to iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and the BBM Global Network. This is Layers of Communication. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart, and today we're visiting with Celeste Allred. I want to remind you that you can find us at lydiataggart.com, and if you want to email us, we would love you to contact us. The email address is lydia@lydiataggart.com. And our call-in number is 866-451-1451. We'd love to have you call in if you want to do that too. So Celeste was just starting at the beginning of the commercial break to describe her energy exchange and how she feels about the connecting physically versus otherwise. So go ahead, Celeste. Tell us more about this energy work that you do.
I do energy work. And for many people, they feel the energy best between 3 to 6 inches off of somebody. And when I'm doing energy work on people, I like to touch them. But I figured out many, many years ago that for me, I needed to be focused in the healing arts on the energetic side versus the physical side, because I had such a problem with touching. And there's a lot of times I'll do energy work with people and never touch them, which is totally cool. But when we are with people, our energetic fields, when we get together, they blend, they melt, and we are able to tell subconsciously so much about the person. We can tell if they're having issues that day. We can tell if they just need a hug of support. We can tell if they're really just upset with somebody or if they're in a great mood because of that energetic exchange. And it conveys so much information in just a touch. It is, there's a reason that your skin has so many neurons, because we are meant to feel. We are meant to touch. And one of the interesting things that's been going on in my life lately is my baby is 5 months old. And it's so fun to just watch him touch, like, different textures on his blankets or the sheets or what he's wearing, or just watching him touch and examine what's going on in his life. And it's really brought to home how much we really do touch and feel. And how some of us can have aversion to touch. And that's okay. And some of us love to be touched. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. My oldest son's primary love language is touch. But how is that appropriate? Well, oftentimes it comes out in roughhousing.
Yes.
That's how he gets his fill, is through roughhousing. But we don't think about it. We don't think about how the kid's roughhousing is actually meeting that physical touch need.
And so many other emotional needs as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find it hilarious just watching my kids roughhouse or roughhousing with their dad, because it's something they all need. Mm-hmm. And when we go to that space of just being willing to be open to touch, it can mean a lot to somebody. I remember when my daughter died, I didn't want to hear what was the condolences or anything else. I just wanted a hug. And somebody put their arms around me and hold me, because I needed to know there were other people still there. When we need that connection to do it, and you mentioned the orphanages and stuff, and there is actually a need in this country but it's in places like the NICU and places like that where the little babies aren't getting the touch. I actually have several friends whose children have RAD because they spent so much time in the NICU and weren't able to be touched.
Yes, when our quads were in the NICU, it was so hard because you can't touch them when they have those special needs. When they're hooked up to the ventilators and different things, you can't overstimulate them when they're trying so hard to survive. And it's really vital that they get some sort of touch. I remember when my little Brendan was in his incubator, and he was struggling more than any of the others at that time to hold his body temperature. And they they tried to put a blanket on him, but it was too much for his little body to handle. And so what they did was they just put more lights on him. He was okay with a hat, which was weird. He couldn't have a blanket, but he could handle a hat. And and he was so tiny, we just put a finger in there and just barely touch him. And it helped him, just that simple little touch. It helped him to stabilize a little bit more. And the more we were able to just barely touch him, the faster he was able to progress. It was just phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, it is amazing. I've had 2 daughters who've ended up in the hospital for surgery, and just watching how much just that touch helps the babies. It is so fun to be in the hospital and watch the heart monitors go ballistic when you give them a kiss when they're babies.
Yes. Oh. So when your
even
daughter
that little,
died,
they feel it.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. And when your daughter died, you just wanted to be held. You didn't need any words. You just needed someone to be there.
Well, when people are speaking words, it's like, how do I respond? I wasn't in a space to respond. I could give a hug and I could accept their loving energy, but thinking was too hard.
Right.
Thinking was too hard to just come up with, how do I respond to this? I'm totally shut down here. And it was literally through touch that pulled me out of the shock.
Right. And so many times so many times we worry about what to say. We think too much trying to comfort someone in that kind of situation as well. If we just would realize we don't have to think. You can't think in that situation as what to respond with. We don't need to think about what to say. We just need to be there and have a hug to support and love. And the words can come out later, months later, even that, we just love each other and support each other. Yeah. Okay, we're going to take another break. This is iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and the BBM Global Network. This is Layers of Communication. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart, and we're visiting with Celeste Allred today. Welcome back to iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and the BBM Global Network. This is Layers of Communication. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart, and today we're visiting with Celeste Allred. Before the break, we were talking about the power of a hug, and you don't need words to comfort someone in their deepest need. That time when Celeste, her daughter, had passed away. And Celeste, I'm guessing that this is part of the reason why you were inspired to create the Hugs You've Got This program. Will you tell us more about that?
We as moms, often we just need a word of encouragement. And the reason I came up with that title is because sometimes we just need a hug, that connection with, you've got this. You're doing a great job. And I put together the Hugs You've Got This program to help the moms with, it's a very unique program. In fact, I've been trying to find similar programs to it, and I haven't been able to. It deals with our health and our home and our personal growth and our relationship, because if the mom is put together, the family runs great. If mom is having challenges in any one of those primary areas, she doesn't have the strength to deal with the kid. And how it ties back into my daughter is we have forgotten how to be intuitive mothers. We look at, well, this report says we need to do this. Well, my kid's not meeting this milestone. There must be something wrong. Or there is something wrong with my child and nobody will listen, which was the case with my daughter. I told the doctors that there was something wrong. It took me 2 weeks to get their attention. I had finally gotten their attention, and it was on her paperwork. It was on her paperwork that I said there was a problem, and I told them what the problem was. That 2 weeks to get their attention. The night I got the doctor to sign off on it, my daughter was doing really, really well. And I went home for the first time in 2 weeks. Her testing was scheduled for 7 a.m. She was gone by 4:45.
Oh, wow.
And I actually got an apology from every single doctor that they should have listened.
Well, that's nice. Doesn't bring her back, but it's nice that they apologize.
It didn't bring her back. And thankfully, we were able to have the medical bills covered, or it would have gone to a lawsuit big time. And I ended up with another daughter back at the hospital 3 years later. And they handled us with kid gloves because they knew not to mess with us. And they knew they'd already screwed up. But the good thing that happened is they changed some of the major policies that they were operating with because of her passing. And it helped benefit other children. So I'm grateful those policies got changed because it continued to help. But when we as parents don't stand up and fight for our children or ask questions of what's going on, or even sometimes it's, I don't know what questions to ask. And so that was part of the reasons I developed the Hugs You've Got, this mentoring program for moms, is so that we could get our health back on track, our homes back on track, our personal growth back on track, and our relationships back on track, so that we would have that confidence in ourselves as people. There's a plague in our world right now that we're not enough. And so
I hear that one a lot.
I would put out is just put it on your bathroom mirror. I am enough. And anytime you're in there, just repeat it and see what starts to change. I challenge you to do that.
Okay, so HUGS is an acronym. What does it stand for?
HUGS stands for health, because if our health isn't in place, we don't have anything. We cannot deal with anything, honestly. Life is just too stressful. We don't have the energy. We're not capable of dealing with stuff. Then the next one is, U is for uncluttered, because when our environment just becomes too cluttered with stuff, whether it's online or fax of mail or laundry or whatever, it starts really, really draining us, and we have to shovel out. G is for growth and where we're headed, because if we don't know what we want and what we're doing, it causes depression. It causes us to not be enough. It causes us to lose track of where we want to be if we don't know. And just our lives change when we have kids. We don't know how we are going to respond to having kids. It's a whole new challenge. And just knowing what that next step is, how to tune in to what that next step is. That's huge. Then S is for civil. And as you can guess, that's for our relationships. Because those are the things that line up. And by the time that we get to N, it's one of the most important parts. But if we don't have the energy, we don't have energy for a relationship. If our house is cluttered up, we don't think about, it's just too much. Having a relationship becomes too much. If we don't know where we're going or what we're doing, we're just too stressed out to give that time to our partner.
Right.
And we all like that good sizzle. But if the other steps aren't in place, we won't have it.
Right. Celeste, tell our audience where they can find you for more information.
For more information, you can find us on our Facebook page, Hugs You've Got This, and our website, Sasha Consulting, SACHA Consulting.com. Our web funnels are kind of in production right now, so they were sort of working this morning when I checked them. So please be patient with us as we're getting this up and running. And please feel free to send me a Facebook message. It's under Celeste Allred, and it's the blue butterfly. So you can find it easier.
I'm so glad that you're able to visit with us today, Celeste. And it's Hugs You've Got This. And I love how even though you're not physically touching and hugging the people, just in the name alone, you're wrapping your arms around them energetically and giving a hug out to those moms who need that extra help. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to have our last break, and I'll be back to visit some more about the healing power of touch. You're listening on TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Layers of Communication, and I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. Welcome back to Layers of Communication on the BBM Global Network, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn Radio. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. You can find me at lydiataggart.com, and I'd love to have some of your emails at lydia@lydiataggart.com. Today we've been visiting with Celeste Allred, and I want to remind you that you can find her on Hugs You've Got This. Search her on Facebook and it'll just come up, Hugs You've Got This. The classes are beginning on April 4th, so go ahead and register there. And of course, you can sign up anytime you want with our frame training on lydiataggart.com. So the power of touch is so amazing. And I have one boy, the same one, imagine that, is the same boy I was mentioning earlier that was having a hard time holding his body temperature when he was in the NICU. And he is now my super needy touch love person. His love language is definitely touch. And I've asked him a few times about how he feels with his love languages. He's 12 years old now, is Brendan. He's such a sweet boy. But other times people have said, or one of my favorite experiences was when one of his teachers said, "Doesn't the sun just rise and set with that boy?" And at that time I was really struggling with him to have to just love him really, because he was so much extra work, more than any of the other kids at that time. It's not still true. It was only true back then. When she said that, I started thinking, how could she say that? The sun rises and sets with him? What does she mean? And so I started paying more attention, because his two top love languages, the touch and the language of gifts, they are my least, or they were at the time, that my least, the ones furthest away from my core. And so I've studied a lot more about how to create this connection with him and how to connect with someone that is so vastly different from me. And I've had some of my clients test it out on their kids, and they come back with the same results. So I share this with you, and I think I've shared it before, but it's worth sharing again. If you give a compliment, it's the words of affirmation. At the same time, you look in their eyes, because that's that really sends the message that you're spending your time and energy on them. And you give them a touch on the shoulder or on the elbow, you do some sort of something touching with them. It will get through those layers and get to their core so much faster than if you try to figure out how to do each individual love language. You layer them together and get to their core faster. And that's what we want to do when we're building our relationships. We want to connect. And I want to remind you that, again, you can find me at lydiataggart.com. And next week, we're going to be having a guest talk about some more amazing things. Tune in again next week. This is Layers of Communication on iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and the BBM Global Network. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. Remember, you're worth it, and so are they. Have a good week.
You've been listening to Layers of Communication with your host, Lydia Taggart. Tune in next week as we break through the layers in order to communicate and connect down to your core on Lydia Taggart's Layers of Communication.